So I appreciate the panel sticking around for a little web exclusive here. I saw an interesting statistic from the Brookings Institution, which did some reporting earlier this year that looked at census projections, and 2045, that's the year that whites will become the minority, 49.7% of the population. That's what we'll be looking at. So looking at this issue of diversity in politics, lack thereof, balance, where we are in 2018, given that statistic, will this problem just fix itself? Can it be that easy?
You know, I think that those numbers are what is kind of spiking what we're seeing right now in the Trump era. I think for a long time, folks have been looking at those numbers knowing that eventually that the minority numbers are going to increase. And so I think amongst white voters, Trump is the answer. I think that's one of the reasons why he's reminding folks that we have to hold on because they're coming. And I think that's the way he kind of feels. They are coming. And so they want to do everything they can to hold on to what they have now because they're not sure how long they're going to have that power. So I don't think that's anything new. I think people are just talking about it out loud. But in terms of numbers and projections, people have always been watching the numbers of minorities, how they're growing. And so I think oftentimes when the media puts those numbers out to say, oh, this is the fastest emerging, group in this state or this city, there's a reason they're doing that. And everyone's looking at that information, but everyone's not looking at it the same way.
And I also think important to note is minority majority districts or minority majority country doesn't necessarily mean minority majority voters, right? And so you can be in a minority majority district, but the majority of voters happen to be white, because people of color aren't voting at the same rates, and it's not the same, it's not the same cultural thing to do. And so we have to work on that each and every day to make it more of a thing that people of color vote.
Absolutely, and actually, if you take a look at Springfield again, Springfield is pretty much a majority city right now. The numbers have been growing, particularly Latino numbers, but we're a very young population, and it's going to take time to get where to get there. And you need to, there's also just some of the other social issues that need to be addressed as well before we can actually claim access to the system. I mean, poverty is a big issue for us, and a lot of people who are coming are immigrants from other countries, from other Latin American countries as well. So those that's what's driving the numbers, and Denise is absolutely right in terms of that's why you see such a backlash from non-minority communities, because they want to protect what they have and they feel threatened. They've always felt that way. Now they I believe just because of the current administration, they feel they have license to be more open with it. But it's always been there. I mean, 2045. That's what 25.
26 years
from now. I mean, that's still a relatively short time. So I think it's going to take a while because, as Ryan said, while you have the numbers themselves don't make the difference. I mean, they have the potential to make the difference, but it's gonna take a while. It's gonna take a while.
I mean, I think it's also important to note that there's a key assumption in discussions of majority-minority nations and majority-minority states that minorities, people of color, Latinos, African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, share the same views. Absolutely. And that is not necessarily the case today. Now, what we could be seeing through the Trump administration is a self-fulfilling prophecy that the focus on white interests and white identity may create a person of color as a political identity that could be mobilized, but that's for the next 2 decades to see.